All right, so this week we are going to be talking, continuing our conversations, our lessons through the tarot. Maybe my first iteration was too long. Maybe that was the universe telling me I was doing too much in the beginning. So, no worries. So, I'm Mel Morris. This is Wednesday Root at 2. And we are going to continue our conversations on lessons through the tarot. So, last week, I talked about moving into a transitional phase, our adolescent phase, where we learned about the hangman, who taught us about taking the time. I just wanted you to kind of have a point of reference where we talked about taking the time to step back, look at things from a very different perspective, and recognizing that whatever's happening in our life, good or bad, if we're trying to change it, then we sometimes need to step back and really give it a whole new look, give it a whole new perspective, right? How can this situation, um, how can I look at this in a brand new way that I never thought about before, right? Sometimes once we do that, right, we then learn about the death card, right? Which I have often said is my favorite card, which some people might feel is creepy, but um, the death card is all about the need for things to end, right? So we've looked at things from a very different perspective. Everything in our life, as we go through these phases, we need to change. We need to evolve, and that's going to require for some things to come to an end, right? Sometimes we're not thrilled about that, but that is the natural progression of life, right? My guest last week for Friend Friday was Lisa Stromson, and we talked about, she's a transition coach. We talked about cycles and, you know, um, everything is always changing and evolving. And, it's important for us to learn to accept and appreciate what comes from the ability to end things, right? When you're able to end and grieve and process and show gratitude for what you've experienced that is now past, you can take that growth and those lessons with you as you move forward in really beautiful ways. So we learned about death, and then we moved into temperance, right? And so temperance, I don't know why I didn't just show you this to you on the screen, but temperance is all about us finding that harmony that comes with blending together the lessons that we learned, the experiences that we've had, blending that together with um, what our expectations for the future are, what our hopes are, as we're focusing on our goals and dreams. Temperance is really about finding that harmony, right? Harmony is the word I would definitely use for temperance, right? So that's kind of the beginning stages, the adolescence that we talked about last week. And this week, if you haven't had a chance already to see our post from yesterday that talked a little bit about the three cards this week in our lesson, this is, as we learn from those experiences, as we continue to move forward, as we process that information, the next three lessons that we're going to go through, um, I'm not going to say, I feel like all these lessons to some degree, I mean, you have to experience, but if you can take with you what you learned from previous lessons, especially from last week, especially from appreciating, learning to let go of things, looking at things from different perspectives so that you can grow and build, then the lessons that are coming up now as we get a little bit older, as we're more experienced, as we're more in our life, right, dealing with the heaviness of adulthood, right? Um, if we're able to, sometimes if we're not able to process that information of perspectives and learning and appreciating what we've had, what we've lost, sometimes we move into our first lesson, our first guest for today. And let me switch this over. And that is the devil energy. Now, I was saying when I think I cut off last time that I this isn't from a religious perspective, right? From a religious perspective, a spiritual perspective, I don't believe in like the devil in what I know of from Christian descriptions. But the devil energy is more about, I see it more as a warning, right? It often shows up, this lesson often shows up when we are uh, more focused on, having a good time, just enjoying life, you know, despite things that we know are not good for us, right? Oftentimes, this card comes up, or this lesson comes up around issues of addiction and attachments and unhealthy codependencies, right? Um, and I think to some degree, many of those issues, again, we all experience in different variations. And part of what gets us out of it a little bit faster is, again, reflecting on the past lessons that we've already learned, right? So to me, the devil card is more of kind of a warning sign, right? So if you ever been in an experience where you're heading down a wrong path, that maybe you're drinking too much or eating too much, or you're seeing somebody who's already got somebody, or any of these situations. Often there are times when we know that we should change. We know we should do something differently because we're placing ourselves in a situation that isn't healthy for us, right? Um, Oftentimes I see this, when we get really down and discouraged about things happening in our life, it's easy to, start drinking, start eating, start, again, doing things that we know are not good for us. And so the devil energy really, again, is kind of that warning that we're not dealing with our issues, with our underlying issues, right? We're just like, forget it, I'm just gonna get drunk. Forget it, I'm just gonna go out and party or hook up or whatever, right? And what's important to remember, as with all these lessons, that the lesson that comes from the devil card is about ourselves, right? This isn't like, oh, you're going to meet some terrible person who's going to take you down this ugly road, right? This is about ourselves. All these lessons are within us. So when we are not dealing with our shadow self, our darker either impulses or again, issues that we just don't want to deal with, the warning then comes out in this card that if you don't stop what you're doing, if you don't reflect on the choices that you're making, right, it's going to continue to lead you down a path that isn't really for you, you know. And this particular deck, here's my pen, there's, I mean, there's a lot of different indicators, but you can see, especially in the feminine character that's here, that there is this, instead of there being like chains, it's like a chain of roses, right? So sometimes, and this is again a little different in each deck, but there is this notion that you don't have to stay here, right? She's able to kind of break free if she wanted to, right? You see that a lot more clearly in some of the other decks. But all of these things, everything that we've learned so far, all these lessons, these are all about choices that we can make in our life, right? And the reality is that like dark shit happens, right? So when we pretend like bad things aren't happening, or I'm fine, I'm good, I don't need to do anything differently, I don't have a problem. um, when you do, right, when in fact that's not the truth, that's taking you away from who you really are meant to be, right? So this devil energy, this card really represents, again, a warning sign for you to take the time to sit with what's really going on in your life and not just pretend like everything's okay when it's not. Okay. So the next card is also, again, I'll say, feels like a very heavy card, and it is to some degree. I mean, I don't want to minimize it. Again, it's a life lesson, right? So last week we looked at the energy of death, right? And again, as I spoke with my friend Lisa and we talked about cycles, death is that like inevitable ending to things. Okay, death is much. I don't want to say easier. It's not. It's not that it's easier. You can imagine it happening. You know that there is, again, this natural progression to things, to relationships, to growth in your life. That's what death represents. The tower represents endings, but endings that you didn't see coming. I mean, maybe you did, but you weren't really ready to deal with it yet. And it's like a sudden change, just like the image, in this card, in any deck that you're going to see the tower in. It is, it's often a time that, if we again, we think about the devil, we think about, okay, I didn't take the time, you know, in previous lessons, I didn't take the time to really sit and look at other ways to do things. I didn't appreciate, and process my grief from whatever endings have happened. I didn't focus on trying to find some harmony in my life. So now I'm just out, drinking, partying, carrying on, or holding all of that within, right? And pretending like I'm okay. And so what happens is you get this tower energy, right? You get like the universe is going to shut that shit down, right? The universe is like, okay, all right, you didn't want to listen, you didn't want to pay attention. I tried to ease you through some things, but no, it's over, right? To me, like that's the tower energy. And often again, if you take into context if you didn't process and you didn't learn like I just described, then a lot of times it's tearing something apart that was already on a pretty shaky foundation, right? So, it's not necessarily that, everything was great, like I learned all my lessons and everything is good. And then, oh my God, my world just exploded, right? I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't happen sometimes, it does, but even when the unexpected happens, right? Even when you couldn't have anticipated something really big changing in your life, if you've learned the previous lessons, the way that it affects you, the way that it impacts your life moving forward is lessened if you really have incorporated what you've learned before, right? So when you see the Tower card, it is about, again, this unexpected sudden change. Everything just is feels like it's falling apart. Everything is just crumbling. It is this like awakening that you needed to have, right? So again, just like that, it's a necessary ending, but it can feel much more dramatic because again, you weren't prepared for it. You weren't even processing that information. And so, the lesson of the tower is that, these types of things, these situations are much more likely to occur, if you aren't processing through your true feelings, your true emotions, the situations in your life, right? The unexpected is much more likely to shake you to your core, right? But the other lesson is that if you find yourself in this position where like everything just seemed to crumble around you all at once, then it's time to let it happen, right? To let it fail. Maybe you've been in a relationship that hasn't been a great relationship. You've been trying to end it, you've been trying to fix it, you've been back and forth, you know in your mind it's time, and then suddenly you find like you just get like they just leave, right? You just come home one day and that person is gone along with all your shit, right? So, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this happened to me. You know what? It's time to let it happen. It's time to just let it fall apart, let it be over, and start again, right? Because there's no rebuilding, right? If this tower, even in this image, right? If people try to, just, oh, we're just gonna, keep the same structure here, but we're just gonna kind of glue that all back together, it's never gonna be the way that it was, right? This unexpected ending happened for a reason. So you have to let it happen, right? Let it fall apart so that you can build something new, right? Build yourself up even stronger, even wiser, right? A message that I have seen, thought about a lot has been this like truth and like brutal honesty. That's definitely the tower card. The tower card is like, okay, you just want to hear the raw truth, here you go, right? So after those two, what feel like again really heavy, kind of hard lessons to learn. There we go. We come to the star energy, right? And so is the star card and its energy is all about like hope, right? Having hope, having faith that things are going to get better, right? Things can get brighter. I can do better. I can do like finally having that feeling after like those really hard lessons of the last this week and last week of finding a place where you're finally not just sad and discouraged, but you're recognizing that there is I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? And when you're rebuilding from the tower, this is the time when you finally realize that yes, I needed to let that go. I can acknowledge my part in that situation or whatever, but now I'm replenishing, right? I mean, that's kind of the word I'd use for this card. I'm replenishing myself and everything around me, right? So, I mean, you can see this person, kind of stepping both on solid ground, on watery emotional ground, but needing to replenish both, right? Needing to replenish our emotions and our, kind of solid core, our core selves, our core bodies, right? Needing to replenish ourselves in every way, right? This is about finding inspiration. This is about, you know, being an inspiration, being a blessing to yourself and to others, and then allowing those blessings to also then return to you, right? Because before you may not have been able to have any of that, right? There was no hope, there was no faith. It was like, oh my God, the world's just falling apart. The star energy is after all of that, reminding you that there are amazing things in your life, that you yourself are amazing. You still have so much more to do and to be, and remembering again like those blessings in your life and sharing those blessings with the world because they're going to come back to you, right? So again, I know especially this week and last week again feel like very heavy lessons, but absolutely important, right? These are real things, as we get older, as an older being experience, as we experience the world more, it's not all roses and rainbows, right? There's going to be heaviness that we have to go through, but it doesn't have to destroy us. It doesn't have to keep us under the covers, in bed for the rest of our life. There are all of these lessons, all of these cards. These are all tools that you can use to help you grow, help you move beyond where you feel like you are right now. Okay, and that's the message, right? That's the point of all of these lessons of me sharing this information is because, next year we're really going to focus on using these lessons, using these tools, right? To keep us moving forward, to keep us moving upward. Okay? So, that's it for the cards this week. If as usual, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'd be happy to answer them. I'd love to hear about, if you feel comfortable enough in sharing any experiences about these cards. This week would be wonderful to hear from you and would be probably pretty inspirational for other people as well. So I encourage you to do that. Make sure that you, switch back to me. Yeah. Make sure that you join me back here on Friday for Friend Friday. I'm going to have a very good friend of mine, someone who I'm so proud of. She's just amazing, amazing. Ish is her name. Dr. Ish Modak is going to be here with me on Friday. She is a doctor. She's a medical director in Texas. So she's on the front line. She's dealing with all the tragedy and hope, upcoming hope, right? That's surrounding us right now with this pandemic. So I'm glad that she's able to make a little bit of time to sit with us on Friday, help us to talk about these things of this week, to talk about these issues of, um, you know, finding that hope, finding that renewal that we need after these really tragic, hard things are happening. She also works with working moms. She has a group called the Mindful Working Mom Collective, where she is helping, women especially, working moms especially, really learn to set boundaries and help them to overcome the overwhelm, right? That comes with being a working mom, right? She works with a lot of doctors and whatnot as well. So, we'll be talking about change, about how this change, what it's going to look like, what it can look like through moving beyond these lessons and even more. So I hope that you'll join me Friday at 6 for Friend Friday. And again, if you got any questions, pop them in. Otherwise, have a magical day. See you later.